Today on HandyDadTV, I'm going to show you how I installed this luxury vinyl plank flooring, LifeProof flooring from the Home Depot in my new family room. Coming up. This video is sponsored by the Home Depot. Welcome to HandyDadTV. I'm Chris Heider, your virtual dad in the cloud. And today we're talking about flooring. I installed this flooring in my family room. I'm doing a family room makeover, putting in a new fireplace, and just built-ins around it, and just revamping it completely. Now my family room was carpet before, and you know, with dogs, it gets dirty and it gets stained, and just never can come completely clean. So the new family room, we wanted something with the look of hardwood, but with the water resistance. That's what we got from this. This is completely waterproof. It's called the LifeProof floor. It's wear protected by a lifetime warranty for residential use, and it is really pretty simple to put down. Now this is an interlocking floating floor, so you don't have to put down any kind of adhesive. Works great over my concrete slab, but it would also work equally well on top of any other type of flooring. Of course, there are limitations, and you have to read the directions to figure out exactly how to prepare the surface. For me, the only thing I did was there was a section of my floor that had tile on it, and all I did to prepare, when I took the tile up, I gouged that concrete a little bit. So what I did is I mixed some thin set mortar, and I just troweled it out to fill in any of the divots that I left there. Other than that, I just vacuumed the floor clean, and I was ready to go. Now this stuff is really nice. It is a vinyl over a rigid PVC core. It's somewhat flexible, as you can see. It's got a rubber back on it, which is good for sound absorption, but also for a moisture barrier. You don't have to put down any other kind of moisture barrier. And it is impervious to water. All right, let me talk a little bit about some of the tools that you're going to need. First and foremost, you're going to cut it with a simple utility knife. Something with a rigid blade. You need it very short, and this one's not bad because you can break off the blade and keep it sharp all the time. You're also going to need some kind of a straight edge, a square, for when you're making cuts. You need some kind of a tapping block. Now I bought this when I bought the flooring. This is useful because it prevents you from damaging these thin edges where the grooves are. And then the last thing is this kind of a pry bar. Now you don't need one this big. This is the Pro version. I think it was about, I don't know, less than $20. Definitely comes in handy, and it is a necessary tool when you need to work against baseboards because you can't get behind them. So you use this to tap over here, and it pulls the boards together. So let me show you how it cuts. It's really easy to do. You use a straight edge, mark however long you need it, and then you just use the knife. And you could just score it one time or twice, doesn't matter, but you can see it scored just the top of the floor itself. And then turn it over, put your hand approximately where the score was, and break. Now this time was actually lucky because it broke the backing too. That's pretty incredible because when I was doing the floor it didn't do that at all. But then once you've got the piece that you need and you put it in, what you're going to do, these edges get lined up, and once everything is lined up correctly, you're just going to tap it down like that. And when you feel no bump here, if it's in correctly, you'll feel nothing. You won't feel the groove at all. So that's one. And let's take another piece. Now to show you how the other pieces go together, this just fits in to that groove. And you can see how it's lifted up a little bit. Well, as you tap it, it comes together. See, there's a gap right here. But as you tap it and it comes together, that lays down perfectly flat. Now this is one of the problems that I was having, is that it would fit down one end and it would come out the other. So that's where the tapping block comes into play. And again, when it's installed correctly, you don't feel any difference between the boards. And you can't even tell where those seams are. It's just such a really nice product. And I'm telling you, it's instant floor. It's the easiest floor I've ever put down. Now, I'm not a young man, but even young men need knee pads. It just makes sense. You don't want to be on your knees all day long putting this floor down. You want to have something that's going to cushion your knees. So knee pads are a very important part of it as well. Here's a rough layout of my remodeled family room to give you a sense of my decision process. On the far end, I have a fireplace with the TV and built-ins, which are the focal point of the room. The other end has the garage door and a step up to the kitchen. When laying any kind of planks, the first decision is which direction should the planks be laid. Typically, you'll either lay them lengthwise with the longest dimension of the room, or with the predominant line of sight when entering. This helps make the room look larger. Next, decide which corner to start in. The flooring is laid left to right, so you need to start in a left-hand corner. I could have started from the top left or the opposite corner, but I chose the top. Next, you need to measure the width of the room to decide if you can start with a full or partial piece. Now, the width of my room is 159 inches, and the boards are 7.1 inches wide. So I divided 159 by 7.1, and I get 22.394 and change. So I can use 22 full width boards, which adds up to 156.2 inches. And that means I'd have one partial strip that would be 2.8 inches wide. Since 2.8 inches is less than half the width of a board, the directions recommend having a partial board for the first and last row. Instead of 22, I would use 21 boards, and that adds up to 149.1 inches wide. Subtract that from 159, and that leaves 9.9 inches for those two boards. So I started by ripping my first row of planks to 5 inches wide, and then installed them with the cut edge against the wall. The directions tell you to use 1/4 inch spacers next to the baseboard to allow for expansion. Well, my baseboards were slightly raised in this room because it was carpeted, so I improvised and put the spacers under the baseboard. But then I had another challenge because my wall wasn't straight. It bowed out in the middle. I discovered this when the second and third rows wouldn't attach very easily. I ended up using the pry bar against the baseboard to hold the middle of the row away from the baseboard. It became much easier after the first 4 rows were done because I could kneel on the new floor while installing the other rows. It also got much easier when I got a helper. We could switch off, one handling the boards and cutting them, and the other focused on installing them. If you ever have trouble fitting a board, make sure you have a brush with you and you brush out the groove to make sure that there's no dust in there. And you'll be amazed, a little bit of dust can affect the way that the boards fit together. My hands were getting sore with all that cutting against the steps. So I decided to use these metal bending pliers to make life easier. Now, I had them already, and I probably wouldn't have bought them specifically for this job, but they definitely came in handy. Now, I didn't have too many obstructions in this room, it's just one big rectangular room. So I would say this piece against the end of the step was probably the most complicated I had to deal with. The first thing I did was cut it to length, and then carefully mark the width and the length of the piece to be removed. I used a scrap piece of flooring as a straight edge to score the surface. And I snapped it with those wide pliers. Now to cut boards to length, turn the board around so that the factory edge is against the baseboard, and use a Sharpie to mark it right at the end of the adjacent board. Score it with a knife, snap it, and cut the backing. And be sure to always cut over a scrap piece, being very careful not to scratch your new floor. To rip the last row, I accounted for my flaky walls by measuring the width at the beginning and end of each board. I scored it with a long drywall T-square as a straight edge, but you can use whatever you have on hand. Those metal bending pliers were very helpful with these rip cuts. And here's where that special pry bar came in extremely handy. There would be no way to tap the boards together without it. The very last step is to install quarter-round molding around the room to cover the edge of the floor. I used white molding around the baseboard and matching molding by the door and tile.